I can imagine in a macro environment, companies have been reticent to spend on things that they feel are extra. But is cybersecurity one area that they pulled back on, and ultimately does that end up hurting them in the longer term?
I think absolutely. If they're not spending enough preventatively, and there is a rough number that we've tossed around in Europe for quite a long time, which is 10% of your total IT spend is what you should reserve for your cybersecurity spend on making sure that all the things that you integrate into your networks and systems also have this component for cybersecurity, whether that's monitoring and detection or prevention of vulnerabilities or all of the other kind of remediation stuff that you would need to have on hand in order to combat such an incident, and have a certain pot reserved for outside counsel as well as forensic support. But most companies aren't doing that preventative stuff, and then they wind up being caught off guard during an actual incident.
We've had so many headlines with MGM, whether it's the ongoing fallout for Clorox, which is trying to really lay bare how much this is going to cost from their own cybersecurity hack. Is this something that regulators are trying to eye, that ultimately we're seeing carrots put in place of hey, the upside of not getting a cyber attack, but also a stick put in place?
Absolutely. So from an SEC perspective, as you know, there was a new SEC disclosure for cybersecurity incidents, and it's about reporting material incidents within 4 days of knowledge of the company that they were actually occurred and that they are indeed material. And this is in order to help shareholders make better decisions about the companies that they've invested in. I would argue, though, this is remarkably difficult to do for a lot of these companies. First, in terms of determining what is a material incident. In the fog of the actual incident, that's really hard to do. So that 4 days is an ambitious, aspirational kind of thing that while you're actually doing all of this, response to an incident, that you can understand the material impact as well. So that's going to be difficult. And I think the Clorox example is going to be a sort of poster child for a lot of people in the cybersecurity industry who are wrestling with this, because you do see that Clorox is going to report a decline in their profits because of this incident. Not only the direct cost impact, but also the fact that they couldn't stock shelves with their product, and then subsequently will need to report to shareholders what the consequences of this cybersecurity incident was. And coincidentally, it was the same group that attacked MGM.
Yeah, can you talk to us about the groups? Scattered Spider, how and what are they bringing to bear that is so upending certain companies?
Well, they're clearly interested in profit, or at least that's what they claim to be interested in. So there are opportunistic attackers from that perspective who are looking for someone who will pay their fees. They're working together with a ransomware group that was formerly or associated with the Russians, Alpha V. And what they're causing is an enormous amount of impact to these companies to just, get that data ransomed, make sure that those operations are locked until the ransom gets paid.
What we keep hearing time and time again is that AI in particular is going to make companies more vulnerable, but also give them the armor that they need to be able to prevent against such attacks. Who's winning out in this race to ensure that AI is being adopted at the fastest pace possible? Initially,
I thought that defenders had a huge head start in this AI race. So we've been having machine learning techniques for a very long time in a lot of cybersecurity tools. And the only types of AI attacks that we were seeing are something called domain generating algorithms. And it is exactly what it sounds like, which is just that you spin up a domain like www or some difficult domain.com in order to stop defenders from finding out what all of those evil domains are and blocking them. So those were the only things we were seeing. And now we're seeing, of course, with things like Darkbird, the ability to craft more, better phishing mails, et cetera. And I think that the defenders are losing their advantage. That advantage is slowly but surely slipping towards the adversaries. And we need to kind of make sure that cybersecurity companies are adopting AI measures in their products, and that our consumers are buying those products.
The likes of, I've certainly heard Brian Moynihan and other CEOs say the one area that they never are going to sacrifice, no matter how many macroeconomic headwinds are, is the cyber allocation and the focus on just protecting customers and indeed every stakeholder. Is that something you're seeing ring true, or ultimately have you seen companies worldwide pull back? And what is your answer to that?
I do think you're seeing a decline overall in the amount of appetite to spend on all types of IT things, including cybersecurity. So I'm not seeing that. Actually, I would love that to be true. Let me be clear. But I think that you're seeing CISO budgets shrink as the importance of this role tends to increase. So globally, the trend is not favorable for security when you look at the actual budget incapacity of these chief security officers.